Welcome back to the Diet Doctor Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brett Scher. Today, we're talking more about the environment, and we're going to do it from firsthand perspectives from two ranchers and a farmer, and what they're going through and their thought process about how they have to, one, make a living, but two, be conscious about what they're doing, both in creating nutrient dense, healthy foods and doing it in a way that helps rather than hurts the environment. Because it's clear how you grow your crops or how you raise your cattle can do significant damage to the environment, or it can be a significant benefactor of the environment, and it can help with water retention. It can help with creating biodiversity. It can help with sequestering carbon. And it's amazing that kind of getting to the same endpoint can be in two polar opposite means of doing it. One that is damaging the earth with fertilizer, with releasing carbon into the atmosphere, and with destroying the soil so that it probably is going to cease being productive at some point in the near future. I mean, that's as damaging as you can get. Or doing exactly the opposite, that's going to keep it sustainable and regenerative for generations to come and still producing nutrient dense, healthy foods for people. So I love just the difference here in how these three individuals are so committed to what they're doing. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. Now let's hear from Daniel Sinton. Now Daniel's a fifth generation rancher. His great grandfather started Avinalis Ranch, where he is now the director of operations. And it's a family-run business. But he's not your average rancher because he grew up on the ranch. But then he went and got educated with a bachelor's from Stanford University, and he took classes at the School of Business. And then he went and worked in philanthropy for years. But now he's been back on the ranch for just about 10 years, running the operations and living there with his family. So he knows firsthand, obviously, what it takes to run a ranch. And he's got the history of how sort of this conflict around ranching has changed over time. And he's got some good suggestions and thoughts about how ranching can be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And he really sees himself as an environmentalist, which we're going to hear more about. So I'm very excited for you to hear more from Daniel Sinton from Avinalis Ranch. And if you like Instagram, if you like pictures of nature and pictures of our ranches, you've got to check him out on Instagram as well. All right, so Daniel, I want to start this part of the interview a little maybe unorthodox. I want to read from Instagram, but it's your Instagram post, and it was really powerful, and I want to get your comments on it and read it. So there's been a short-held belief that ranchers don't care about the land that they run their cattle on. If you know a rancher, you know this to be as far from the truth as possible. However, I think it is important and difficult to explain how important our land is, not just to our livelihood, but to our souls. There isn't a single person on the planet who covets a raindrop more than a rancher, and no one is more in tune with their soil. This past year has been a brutally dry year. After that first rain last week, we all waited with our breaths held for the first blade of green grass to arrive. Now we await the next raindrop to sustain those tender, short green blades and the soil that is so dependent on it. That grass that grows on our ranches is not just for our cattle. Every ranch sustains a variety of wildlife that can't thrive in the cities or on federal land. On our particular ranch, we have deer, bears, turkeys, mountain lions, quail, dove, bobcats, and elk, to name just a few of the larger species. To count the plants that our ranches provide a place to grow on would take an entire book. As we take care of our herds, ranchers are keeping an eye on these plants and animals to monitor not just their health, but the health of the ecosystem that we have been blessed to manage. We are ranchers, the original environmentalists. Now, I got to say, since I know you, I wasn't totally surprised to read that. But I think most people, when they think a rancher wrote that, they're going to be pretty surprised. So give me sort of your thoughts, the background of behind that and what you think the response is. And let's kick off the conversation that way.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I since that post, a lot of my thoughts have been on how can I be a better advocate for ranchers and getting out the word about why we aren't the villains and cattle aren't the villains in this climate crisis. And Instagram's great because it allows a soapbox for everyone, and that has its drawbacks, obviously. But um, I it was probably the only post I've ever posted where I've said anything of that nature, and I got a really good response from it, and it was encouraging because it felt like maybe we do have a voice in this whole thing. And for years cattle have been vilified, uh, and that's just not the case. I think that we can get into the science of everything, but between carbon dioxide and methane, but the idea that cattle are a problem has always centered around the topic of methane. And methane, which is a greenhouse gas, is something that we need to help mitigate. But carbon is something that lasts in the atmosphere for 1,000 years. Methane is 12 years. Carbon is 83 times more powerful. So the idea that reducing your meat consumption or eliminating cattle from the land is so misdirected, because it's the same thing as saying, well, cars are bad. Well, they are, and we need some better solutions. And the same people who have climate crisis on their mind are saying, yeah, we need to reduce and eliminate cars, but their solution wasn't to actually do those two things. It was to electrify them. And the idea that cattle, we need to either reduce or eliminate them, it's just on a completely different scale. I come from a long history of cattle ranching. My great great grandfather started this ranch that I live on here in 1875. I'm the fifth generation. Going back to the part about the soul, the weather, we thrive on weather as ranchers. And those raindrops are everything. Yesterday it rained 10 hundredths, and every hundredth counted, because we're just cattle ranchers is a often used phrase, but we're grass farmers. And um, grass farmers and ranchers are some of the best climate people on the planet, because we have this massive amount of land to be able to sequester carbon. And it's a real opportunity. And I think that by vilifying cattle in this discussion, you're really alienating a lot of people who can actually help. um, Cattle are little carbon tractors out there. They go out and they eat the grass. It produces more soil. It captures more carbon every single year. I figured out prior to the call that on our 18,000 acres, we sequester 5,400 tons of carbon every single year. And that's just on our ranch. The Savory Institute says that we have an opportunity to sequester another 200 million tons of carbon if we can improve our soils on rangelands. So, again, I think that vilifying cattle is really doing a disservice both to ranchers and our capabilities of what we can do on our property, but also just completely misguided.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And there was recently the COP26 conference about climate change, and I saw this one tweet where they showed like 15 Mercedes SUVs lined up, to transport the people to and from the conferences. And of course, everybody flew there on their private
Sure.
jets, but they're
Right.
talking about cattle, right? So that goes back to the discussion you just had about the carbon dioxide versus the methane. Um, but it does seem like it's taken a whole new life recently of an increased interest in cattle, and part of that is probably because of the plant-based meat options that now exist. So people now have strong financial reasons to push this environmental agenda even more. But I'm curious, like, what you think, because like you said, you're a fifth generation rancher. Your great great grandfather's been doing this, and it's you've seen this since you were a little kid growing up on that ranch. What have you seen in terms of the atmosphere, or I guess the conflict against your way of life, what you dedicate your life to every day of taking care of your cows and taking care of your grass. What have you seen as the transition, or has it sort of always been an issue?
I don't. I'm certain my great great grandfather never had to deal with this particular issue, but I mean, it's hard because, like I said, we need to be a part of the conversation, and in that piece, we need to not be vilified. And I think it's important that it's an issue that's arisen mostly in the last 20 to 30 years. But in that same time frame, many of the organizations that originally started the vilification of cattle and ranchers is they've come around to realizing that cattle are a huge tool that can be used to help mitigate all of this. So organizations that are have been in conservation for hundreds of years, they are now introducing cattle to properties that they own, and that's been happening for the last 10 years. So I think that there obviously the fake meat thing is introduced a whole nother level of pressure on this thing, but I'm not totally concerned about fake meat. I feel like people understand that that's not necessary. I'm sure it's helpful in some way. Proteins are great. We need to produce more protein, which is a fantastic segue into the fact that we're sequestering carbon on land that can't be done. Nothing else can be done with it. You can't. I mean, you could put homes out here, but it's a long way from anywhere. Um, you can't put intensive agriculture on it. Really, I keep glancing outside my window because I'm in the middle of nowhere, and uh, nothing can go where those cattle can go, and they're doing a service by, like we've talked about, sequestering carbon, but they're also building the soil, which will essentially sequester more carbon, and they're producing protein.
Yeah,
Um, Really, there can't be any better use for the land, and that's one of the big pieces to me that in this whole thing people are missing. Let's just say that we remove cattle altogether from the planet. Um, you end up with land like ours. There's millions of acres in the United States that cattle are run on that can't, nothing else can be done to it. The land isn't just going to go back to nature. We've removed all ruminants from the conversation. There are no more ruminants roaming around in herds. That's not a possibility anymore. So the land will eventually degrade into something that's just a weedy patch that eventually removes all of the sequestering possibilities in it. And there's no oxygen that can get into to the grasses to be able to sequester the carbon every year, and so you're actually tipping the scale in the opposite direction, and you've removed a huge protein source. So the idea that you're just going to eat less meat or beef, or you're going to remove the cattle is super short-sighted. I mean, you're not going to just remove all the cars from the planet. That's not going to happen. I think it's nice that we're transitioning into electrifying the grid and everything like that, but those those things are going to create other problems, just as if just in the same way that if you remove cattle, you're going to create a
yeah.
massive amount of other problems. That's not even saying what happens if you do take rangeland and you drop a bunch of houses on it. you're
Hmm.
you're not only taking away the sequestration, but you're increasing your carbon footprint on that land. So you know cattle just need to be a better part of the conversation, and the people who are vilifying cattle need to have us at the table to be able to understand this.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you really phrase it as being part of the solution, and getting rid of them just makes the problem so much worse. Now, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be out there on the ranch with you, and it's amazing, and riding up and down the hills on the horses, and watching the cattle and how much care you take of the cattle. I can't help but think, like, the people making these decisions and vilifying cattle, as you say, they've probably never set foot on a ranch. And so I guess, do you think if they saw what you did, if they saw the ranch, if they saw the grass, if they saw the cattle, do you think that would change the way they see things? And then I guess conversely, they probably have also never seen a monocrop facility growing wheat, soy, or corn with the tractors and the pollution from the tractors. If they saw that, do you think they would change? So I guess the question is, how much of a problem is it that it's people sitting in cities in high-rise buildings making these decisions who don't have the firsthand experience like you?
Boy, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there because there's so much involved in that, right? I think to start, I was thinking about the rain thing in my Instagram comment, and you know, rain in the cities is just a nuisance, right? Whereas, if somebody's in Los Angeles and they go outside and they go, "It's raining," it's a problem, right? Whereas I mean, we're praying for rain. We got rain yesterday. I already can't wait for the next drop. And so I think there's a huge disconnect, not just from people, living in cities or elsewhere, but um, even especially with people who are doing the legislative things that we need to have. We need to have them doing what you did. You need to come out to the ranch. You need to be able to see it, and that goes back to my original comment a few minutes ago about environmental groups that originally took a position that cattle were bad for the land. Um, those same people, it took them purchasing the land. There's a very specific instance of this happening with the Nature Conservancy where they purchased a piece of property and they purchased it solely for the tiger salamander. So they had the habitat all set up for the tiger salamander. Well, the first thing they did is they removed the cattle from the property. Well, the weeds came in that snuffed out all of their habitat, um, and the salamanders left. Well, fortunately, the person who was running that ranch for the Nature Conservancy, he was a longtime member of the Nature Conservancy. He met up with with the rancher next door who was running cattle, and he said, this is a couple of years down the road, and they essentially had none of the salamanders left. He said, we've lost all of our salamanders. He said, well, they're all over on our place because there's no habitat for them left. And no joke, that's what happened. And it took him, that one single person, realizing that this is what it takes. And so they brought the cattle back out, and immediately the salamanders returned. It takes that kind of boots on the ground situation for people to really understand what we're talking about. And I can talk until I'm blue in the face with somebody from the legislature, but they've got a lot of things going on their minds and other fish to fry, and they don't have time to come out here and do something like that. So I'm not sure how to make that happen and how to make it clear that we're a part of the solution. um, but it certainly would help a lot if somebody came out and looked at what we're doing and kicked the dirt with us.
Now let's talk about being part of the solution and what it takes to be part of a solution. Because there are, so many ranches in the country where they maybe have been doing the same thing for generations and generations and not necessarily changing or innovating how they work. And we've heard from one rancher already who's really trying to put into practice sustainable agricultural type practices to really revitalize the land and be in carbon sink. So I guess the question for you is, do you think you have to go to that point to have sustainable ag practices, to do, short-term rotational grazing, moving the cows in groups every few days, because that presents a lot of challenges, especially on a ranch like yours, where it's spread out so far and where, things have been done a certain way for so long. So I guess one is, what are the challenges for you to be able to achieve that? And two, what do you think you have to achieve in order to become part of the solution?
That's a great question, and it's probably the best point in all of this is that uh, we may not have changed our practices dramatically over the last 140 years. We've been a good carbon sequestration factory for those 140 years. And can we do better? Of course. And I think rotational grazing and, obviously the big catchword right now is regenerative agriculture. Those are things we're doing already. There are little tweaks that we can do each individually as ranchers, but the majority of ranchers ranching cattle on open ground are already doing a lot of that. So I think that there is a potential to increase that via rotational grazing. So that's a piece of it. But I'm going to try to use the analogy again of cars. Um, you can they can continue to make better cars with better gas mileage or electrification, um, in that part of the process, but there is a single piece of that engine and that automobile that is the problem, and it's in the output, right? So our current problem in the cattle industry is less on our end of raising the cattle, and it's more in that finishing time. So I don't want to vilify that finishing piece of it, because that's part of the system, and but the system needs to change a little bit, and there I think lies the biggest potential for changing our part in this, and so there's been this huge resurgence of local direct grass-fed beef and even corn-fed beef, whatever, however you want to do it, but direct to consumer stuff like we've started in the last year, and a lot of other people throughout the pandemic have started, um, is a fantastic way to go. And when I deliver a piece of beef to somebody from a direct consumer model here on the ranch, there is almost no carbon involved in that. And so I think shifting our systems a little bit to that closer to home direct model will be helpful, but we have to feed a lot of people. I mean, there's a reason why we've created this huge engine after World War II to feed a lot of people, and it's a great engine for feeding people. Now, I think that there are probably a lot of ways that part of it, so the feedlots, doing bladder systems for capturing methane from the manure, those types of things, I think could be a huge help in all of this.
Yeah, but I think that's a great point that we're not just talking about grass-fed or feedlot and that one's good and
Right.
one's bad, but we're also talking about the whole system and how you get the meat to the consumer, and that plays a big part too. And I've got to be honest, I haven't heard much discussion about that in sort of like the popular media. It's more sort of the black and white and less about the process behind it. So, I mean, do you think people just kind of don't want to hear it? It's like a nuance people don't want to hear. It's so much easier to make it black and white, or what's it going to take to bring that up to the discussion so when we're talking about the environmental impact, people can be able to see that there are more details that don't have as much to do with what they think is the number one cause.
Well, so I think the issue is that a lot of the news and the information that's being put out right now is being put out by people outside of our industry, right? It's people who have no idea about what
Yeah.
what we do, and they don't know the difference between me and a feedlot guy. We both have cattle. That's what it is to them, right? And same thing with legislative stuff. They see it in that light where we're all the same group, right? And ironically, nobody in the cattle industry likes to say this because this is biting the hand that feeds you, and I'm even scared to say it. But really, within the industry, cattlemen, producers is what we call ourselves, the people who are producing the cows, are so disconnected from the other part of things, which is the feedlot and the packers. And packers are a monopoly. Cattlemen don't like to say that because they're afraid that they'll never be able to sell their cattle, but they really are a monopoly. And in 1972, my grandfather realized they were a monopoly and he had no pricing power in the situation. He knew that 50 years ago. And so he diversified into wine grapes to be able to help us work our way through these problems. But getting to the heart of the matter is that we as producers aren't putting the information out to the sources that need it. And so I think that that's why this conversation is so great. I really hope people will be able to listen to what we're talking about and spread that news that we're talking about. But cattlemen don't want to go and do these things because they're afraid that the packers are going to turn against them, and or they're just too big and powerful. They hold all the lobbying uh, power in this whole thing. So you know, when somebody goes at the legislature says, well, we should probably do something about legislating some sort of methane capture at feedlots and packers, they don't want to say that because they're getting their pockets lined by those guys, and we're not. So I think as an
Mm.
industry, the people who have the biggest power aren't going to voice something like that because eventually the buck stops with them, and they're going to have to pay for these methane bladders or whatever the solution is. Um, I think as an industry, we really need to be able to come forward and start to uh, direct the narrative.
Yeah, so that's a problem where the people who are most involved in the process and most want to fix the process don't have the power.
Right.
So that's a real problem. So the question then becomes, what's the solution? And the one thing I can think of is, like, we as individuals consuming meat have to be the solution with how we choose, where our meat comes from, buying it from the, locals farmers market, looking for a ranch like yours that does direct to consumers. Do you think that's enough, that if enough people started being more conscious about how they shop for their meat and where they got their meat from, that it would be enough to of a groundswell to start to turn the tide a little bit towards the ranchers and more away from the big monopolies?
I sure hope so. I mean, you can see that. I mean, COVID was a fantastic thing for that. The amount of people out there looking when they went to the store and there wasn't anything there, it 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 accelerated that movement dramatically. And so I hope that people are starting to get an understanding of what that means. To be able to do that. The problem that's currently happened is we moved from a system a long time ago of individual local slaughterhouses and feedlots and things like that that could service the local areas to these huge centralized packing plants, and the infrastructure is gone. There is a nice movement right now of trying to get those to come back online. We have a local place here that can do a fair amount of animals, but nothing at scale. And so it's going to take a lot of money being poured into the system of producing these local harvesting units that can service that and bring it back. It's the other piece of this is that it's more expensive to do that, right? So these giant
Yeah.
systems are there for supplying massive amounts of food, and you can't blame it. There are a lot of people who need proteins, and beef is a fantastic way to get that protein and nutrients. And doing it at scale, this is pretty much the way to do it. And so, to me, I think when people can afford it, I think people should try to get something locally and direct. Um, but when they can't, I think we need to try to fix some of those systems. But we need to put some money back into capturing some of the methane that exists in those systems. But um, I mean, long term, I don't know exactly how to feed billions of people uh, without having a giant system like that. And really, if we're talking about climate stuff, there's a solution that nobody really wants to talk about that is the crux of the entire problem and the solution at the same time. And it's just we have too many people. We're really good at making people, and that number is growing from 7 billion now, or 7.5, something like that, to 10 billion in a short amount of time. That's a lot of people to have in the world, and we got to feed more people, so it only exacerbates the issue. And so but nobody wants to deal with it from that perspective. So
It's a good point. And the other good point though is that it's almost like the government, if they wanted to solve the problem, could invest in the meat industry, could give, subsidies to the meat industry so that local local production and delivery could be less expensive, and then that would cut down on the greenhouse gases. So rather than trying to ban it or limit it, they could invest in it so that it could be done the right ways. But if unfortunately, if we're waiting for the government to do that, I think it's going to be
yeah.
a
Yeah,
very,
I
very
I
long
mean,
time.
that's a fantastic point, though. There's if there's a lot of money going into dealing with the climate problem at the moment, and this should be, if cattle are going to be vilified, this should be a part of the solution, and governmental support in getting these systems to be more climate friendly is a fantastic solution. So it's not about, as we talked about before, it's not
Yeah.
about removing cattle from the whole system, and it's not about reducing your meat consumption. That's not that's not the problem. Um, all of these animals that end up in that final piece of the system at the packer start on places like ours. So when people are talking about the methane being a part of the problem, they're not taking into account the amount of carbon that we're sequestering on the front end of this. So, you know, I think that we need to change the narrative, and I think that it starts with things like what you and I are doing right now.
Yeah, I think this has been a great discussion, and so much about, kind of like you said, boots on the ground, what it's like, boots on the ground, and what you can accomplish, and how we have to change the thinking. But so I want to transition for a second though and get a little personal and talk about, what it means to you to be a rancher. Because I mean, look, you grew up on a ranch, but you're Stanford educated. You've got a business degree. It's not like ranching was the only thing you could do. You've worked in philanthropy for years and you had a lot of options, but you came back to the ranch to become a rancher. So why? What was the pull and what does it mean to you
Oof.
to be a rancher?
Well, obviously, the history of the family has a lot to do with it. Being gifted something as amazing as this kind of a property is, not too many people get that opportunity, and it's nice to have been educated in a place where most of these folks don't have anyone that they run across in this kind of a field, and so that's been great. I've managed to educate a lot of my friends who went to Stanford with me, and they're all on board with this whole idea. And so those are great people within the world to be able to help further this cause. But from a personal standpoint, I love being outdoors. Growing up on the ranch, you're outdoors all the time. You're getting your hands dirty. It's just a great way to live, and I wanted to raise my family in that same light. And so, um, you know, my kids are out there with me, getting their hands dirty as well. And um, as you know from being out here, there are very few jobs as great as ours where we get to get on a horse, we ride, we check on cattle, we look at the soil, we look at the grass. You're out in nature all day. At the end of the day, you're tired and you feel good. And ultimately, it all goes back to providing something better for future generations. Our rangelands are disappearing quickly, and um, that the rangelands provide an amazing benefit, not just monetarily for the state, um, but in open space, clean air, clean water, carbon sequestration, and wildlife habitat. I've spoken in my Instagram post about the amount of wildlife that we host here on the ranch, and without rangeland like ours, that stuff doesn't exist. Most of the forest land and national uh, owned land is brushy, thick, dense forest stuff that animals aren't going to be inhabiting. So open range land like ours provides that habitat. And we're, I mean, going back to the personal part of it, we love the animals that are on our ranch. You know, every day I get to see something new. You know, or not new, but I when I see turkeys or deer or elk or mountain lions or bears, whatever they are, roaming around on the property. Um, I feel like we're doing our part to save them and create a great habitat for them. And we do projects every year to try to improve that habitat. You know, we have water projects so that we're dispersing water throughout the ranch that makes it easier for those animals to take advantage of it. We have little ramps that come up and into the water trough and out of the water trough so that quail and other animals can come up those ramps and drink and then get back out if they fall in or something like that. And so we're constantly trying to make the habitat better, not just for our cattle and for the land, but for the wildlife.
Yeah, and I remember that Instagram post you had with the bear sitting in the water trough. I thought that was a
Yeah.
kick. I got a kick out of that one. But I want to and I just want to finish with quoting that we are ranchers, the original environmentalists. And I think what you just said there really sums it up. That it's not even about just the cattle or just the grass, but also the wildlife, and that's what environmentalists should be about, about the whole environment. So I appreciate that sentiment and all you're doing to try and spread
Yeah,
this
no, thanks. And
message.
and I really
So thank
appreciate
you.
that you brought that up because it is something that I wanted to end on was that we are the original environmentalists. There's nobody who cares more about the land than us, and we're engrossed in it every single day. And I hope we get to be a bigger part of the conversation going forward. But I also want everybody who's listening to, when they see somebody with the cowboy hat on, and never mind politics, I want them to be understood that when they see that cowboy hat, whether it be on them walking around or in the truck as they're driving by, that those people are out there working to make land and open space a better place for everyone to enjoy.
Now let's hear from Kevin Muno. Now, Kevin has a degree in business administration and management from University of San Diego. And one of the things that I like about his story is that he doesn't come from a ranching family or a ranching background, and he sort of worked his way through kind of the real world, right? And it came sort of like almost a mission within himself to bring together nutrition with the bigger picture and the bigger connection, and that's what got him into ranching and specifically regenerative agriculture or ranching. And so he's at Perennial Pastures Ranch, and they're pretty popular on Instagram at perennial.pastures, and he's the co-founder there. And as you're going to hear, he has a lot of thoughts about how to make this work because look, he's going through it himself right now, trying to figure things out. And he's sticking to the principles of regenerative agriculture because he believes it so strongly and has to sort of figure his way on how to make it logistically work. And it's not easy, but he's making it happen. And he's got a dream for the bigger picture and he's got a vision for the bigger picture. And he's got a plan for how it's going to work. So hopefully, that plan will translate to other people as well, and that his message will help other people. And also, he's got a message of just how you can help support it. If we're not all ranchers, right? But if we have a passion for this and a willing or a desire to be part of the greater good to help the soil, help the environment, there's a way we can help as well. So let's hear what Kevin Muno from Perennial Pastures Ranch has to say. So, Kevin, I'm dying to hear. You go to college, you get a business administration degree, you're out working in the world, and for some reason, you decide to co-found Perennial Pastures Ranch and start a cattle ranch. So what happened? What was the motivation here?
Yeah. So really, for me, it started with the paleo diet. As an athlete, I had a trainer who was really big into the paleo diet, and he turned me on to Dr. Lauren Cordain's book, and I read through it. And for me, the whole evolutionary eating thing just made so much sense. I always had a pretty big admiration for nature, and I always feel like nature has a lot of inherent wisdom in it, and we're more part of nature. I mean, we're still animals, but we're more part of nature, and I feel like the closer you could get to nature, the more efficient and better life you can live. So I got really into eating grass-fed beef, and then after college, I took a job in software sales for 1 year, and it was with a company that was very successful. So we were able to build up a little nest egg, and I got to ask myself the big questions in life: what do I really want to do? What's going to make me happy? And I have some really early childhood memories going up to the Eastern Sierras with my grandpa, to Mammoth Mountain, and being outside and being happiest in nature. So I said, how do I find a career that combines food, being out in nature, and so that led me down a path of gardening and permaculture, and kind of came across permaculture and was really interested in growing all my own food. And I went to my wife at the time and said, babe, we can just subsist on land. I won't have to work, and we can just grow our own food, and just that'll be it. That'll be good. And she said, okay, well, see how that goes, and then soon found out that there's not too many people that are just growing their own food and not working for a living, especially if you want to have a family. So I had to choose a bigger career in that, and just started partnering with people in the space in permaculture and regenerative agriculture that were really doing big things in the space, particularly at scale. So I took my PDC, which is my permaculture design course, from Josh Robinson at the San Diego Sustainable Living Institute in 2013, and my eyes were open to this whole new way that humans could be a positive impact on nature, and we can build soil and have a good relationship with nature. And then I got into working with Mark Shepard, who wrote a book called Restoration Agriculture, and he has been one of the guys to scale permaculture and trees and animals to a larger scale. And then the more I got into that whole sphere, the farther I went. I came across holistic management, which was started by Alan Savory in Africa, and I had the pleasure and benefit of working with his son Roger Savory. So I learned a lot about ranching then. That was in 2016 that I did that. So I guess one of my strengths is I go to the best in the
Yeah,
business and I
sounds
say,
like it.
hey, can I work for you? And I just learned a whole bunch, and one thing led to another, and came across this opportunity to buy a local cattle company here in San Diego in 2019, and the transaction took place in 2020. And we bought a local cattle company that had 16,000 acres of leased ground here in San Diego County. And we also were able to acquire the herd that they had, which is at the time about 270 cow calf pairs. And then we've essentially been implementing our regenerative agriculture business plan ever since then, putting in more fence, putting in more water, developing a meat business, which is Perennial Pastures Ranch, which we're now in 6 farmers markets here in San Diego County, and soon going to be developing our online business. So that's kind of the short story to how I started out as an athlete to where I'm at today as a
Yeah, I
rancher.
love connecting those dots as an athlete, focusing on nutrition, and then from that way getting just not just connected to food, but connected to where food comes from and how it's raised. And but then going beyond the food part to the land part. Now that's what I find so interesting about what you're doing is you didn't just jump in to start a cattle company. I mean, it doesn't do you justice to say it's a cattle company or it's a beef company because you're really trying to
Right.
revitalize this land. Now, I have to say, I was fortunate enough to come out and meet you at the ranch, and you gave us a great tour of the ranch, and it was wonderful to see. I mean, it's beautiful and just vast, and to see the cattle there. But at the same time, like it's intimidating. It's dry. It looks brittle. It doesn't look like you can really just snap your fingers and have regenerative agriculture. So you really had to have a motivation to want to restore this land and the imagination to do it. So I guess there's a lot there. But tell me what really hits you most about saying, I don't just want to raise cattle. I want to help the land. How did that really connect for you the most?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess it kind of started, from a spiritual perspective. I feel, very connected to the land, and the more that I learned that I myself and putting together a team could actually improve land, it became something that was beyond just, the science of soil or producing nutrient dense food. It became, an exercise in becoming part of a greater whole for me. And that just made me happier.
Yeah.
Tied a circle around all these things. And, it just feels so good to go out there and know that you can work with these animals, to improve the land. And really all it comes down to is management and design, and the fortitude to see it through. So for me, it became an exercise, more mentally of, okay, I can feel good about this career. I can feel connected to a greater whole, and that, we're not just improving the land, but we're improving rural community. We're doing rural development. We're tying the urban and rural, folks together and creating a conversation around food, which I think a lot of problems in our society today stem around, people not sitting down together, anymore over a glass of wine or a beer and a nice meal, and being able to like hash things out. So
Mhm.
to me, it try to draw as much circles around things as I can. And for me, food was at the nexus of a lot of these issues that we see in our society today. So.
Yeah, I mean that is a great point. When you talk about people not really understanding each other, understanding sort of what they're doing, I guess you could say, or where their motivations are. We can learn a lot about that just by sitting down with people. So you get the two sides, right? Meat is bad, or meat is good, and you're killing the planet, or we're saving the planet, or all Bill Gates, all meat should be fake meat, basically, versus you've got the sacred cow behind you that we can really save the planet by focusing on regenerative agriculture, these polar opposites. So I mean, you sort of have stepped into that minefield in a way. So how do you process that when you see so much news talking about that cows are destroying the atmosphere and contributing to greenhouse gases, and that we would do the planet such a favor by getting rid of cattle and going to fake meat? Like, now that you've committed your life, your livelihood to doing this, that's gotta hurt, and I'm curious how you respond to that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, it kind of comes back to that whole evolutionary study and, the study of how natural systems and the planet has thrived for, millions of years, and where we started to where we're at today. And started with a pile of rocks, and life started colonizing those rocks and creating soil, and the fungi were a part of that. And then we came along, a couple million years ago, and started doing our things, and mammals, and everything just started to evolve and live in its niche. And so for me, it's nature has always kind of gotten it right. Nature always bats last. And there's no vegan ecologies. And the way to really truly build soil is with animal integration. And so we've always, killed things. Animals have always killed each other. Even if you're living a vegan lifestyle, you're still, in a large way, if you're eating from large monocultures, eradicating ecosystems that used to be habitat for animals. Like, look at the Midwest, for example, used to be one big giant oak savanna, and now we grow monocultures of corn and soy in there, which are the basis for a lot of the grain based diet. So again, it's just once you kind of understand that wisdom of nature, and you've studied how the planet evolved, and it's gotten and been functioning with us, and would function without us if we were here, and keep building soil and aggregating. And it's just hard to deny the science and all of that data, and just years of it happening, by something that's so new, which is really agriculture. If you look at grain based or annual based agriculture, it's only been around for 10,000 years, which is like 0.000001% of like us being existing on this planet. So yeah, so regenerative agriculture just made sense. It was like, oh yeah, that's how bison or wildebeest move across grasslands. Oh, okay, and they rotate like this, and that builds soil. And the deepest soils in our worlds now formed that way. The Midwest again had large herbivores on it and evolved, and that's why it's the breadbasket of the country. The California Central Valley was the same way, elk and large herds of herbivores moving across that, and the valley oak. So it was more of a savanna like ecosystem. And we've been farming that for quite a long time too, and it provides a lot of the food for our country. So I just kind of try to take people there and try to draw a larger hole around their very niche argument or their niche perspective, and then get them out to the ranch, because seeing is believing. And if you can see the cow how it is and how it grazes and how it lives most of its life, out on the land, and it takes one trip, obviously, or in our case, hopefully eventually it won't never take a trip for the ranch if we process it on the ranch. But as it is now, it has one 2 hour truck ride to the slaughter facility, and has one bad day. And even that day, we try to take care of them as much as we can, where we really do low stress livestock handling practices. Our slaughter facility uses temple grandin methodology to really make sure that even that day is not too bad too. So um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of where I like to take the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. So, um, now let's shift a little bit though and get into sort of the practical nature of this, because like I said, for you to take a look at that land that you have your business on now, your cattle company, and to think where you could go with it, to dream what you could turn it into as a regenerative ranch. I mean, that takes imagination. And I guess my question is like, how hard is it? Like, what are the hurdles? Because you hear, we've had Diana Rogers on the show. We've had Nicolette Hahn Nyman on the show. We've heard of the benefits and how great things can be if you get to the point where you're using regenerative agriculture and sustaining it that way. But to get from point A to point B seems like it could be pretty intimidating. So tell me, some of the hurdles that you've had to come across, what you think the average rancher would have to be able to figure out, and what the challenges are for them to be able to transition their cattle business over to something that's regenerative. Because sort of we got to figure out how to scale this, right, in order to really make it save the
Right,
planet.
for sure. Yeah. Well, business partner of mine, Graham Hand, has done a lot of studies on this, and there's a professor, Doug McKenzie Moore, who's kind of studied the barriers to adoption of certain movements. And Graham studied it and said, really, it's comes down to an infrastructure issue. The way you do this, is you install fence, you install water pipes, so you can move cows around with the right behavior, the right impact at the right times, and you can leave fields resting for a long period of time. So it's a big infrastructure push. That's probably the hardest part. And if I would do it all over again, this is my first really big go at it. But if I would do it all over again, I'd build the fencing and the infrastructure layers first. And I think what's really going to help it scale is people just continuing to have success in it. Gabe Brown is one of the big uh, leaders, in the field, and he's very transparent with his numbers, and he's profitable. He's quite profitable, quite more profitable than the average farmer, and it's only going to take a matter of time, to see your neighbor making more money than you are, and you're plus or minus 3% every year, and the economics are really going to change things once ranchers start making the money that they should be making for supplying the nutrient density that they're supplying to families. And when people start to learn about that and create a true relationship with their rancher, and then if we can actually finally, even maybe, let's say, crazy idea, but pay farmers and ranchers to install green infrastructure. And what I mean by green infrastructure is, 2 to 3 feet deep of topsoil across watersheds. And instead of putting a new dam here in California, we can install topsoil at that rate. We're going to slow the water down when it rains. We might create more rain, because 40% of rainfall actually falls as part of the small water cycle from plants evapotranspiring. And if we have more green living things growing on the ground and actually creating clouds, we might actually create more rain. California, according to the records, used to have a lot more summer rain. We don't now. Our rain mostly falls in January, February, and March. When the Spanish first came here, they saw green, in the summertime. We barely
Mhm.
have any green now in the summertime. So, yeah, so just kind of those cascading effects. Hopefully, there's kind of anchor ranches like ours that can get a foothold, and then create little, education centers where we come in and teach people how to do this. Because one cool thing about the regenerative movement is it's not like, hey, this is mine and I want to hold on to it, and it's this is my IP and I'm going to protect it. The movement as a whole is a very abundant movement, and there's people out there constantly teaching about it, because the reason we got into this was actually, to make land better. And I don't think any rancher wants to make their land worse. It's just one of those industries that is slow to move, and for good reasons. They've done certain things, and it more or less has worked or not worked. But once another way is so much better, and then the new generation comes in, it's just only a matter of time, I think, before people change.
Yes, that's interesting. As the new generation comes in, it sounds like you think it's inevitable, which would be great. But you brought up money, so let's talk about money for a second. It's a big capital investment to have all the fences, to put in all the water piping, to have the infrastructure that you need. It's a capital investment. So for somebody who has been in the cattle business for generations and is basically making just putting food on the table every day, just paying the mortgage, just getting by. That type of capital investment can be pretty daunting. So, how do you think people can do it if they don't necessarily have the capital off the bat to do it?
Yeah, it's a good point. There's all sorts of different situations. It comes back down, I think, to your individual context and your land base, your resource base, sort of your skill sets. I guess, one of my strengths, going to business school at San Diego, was that I had a business background, and through the years I learned how to raise some money. So I didn't start this with any family money. I don't have a background in ranching at all. I learned it all from myself and from mentors, but I was able to get a motivated group of investors together to purchase a company that had some scale. You need scale in livestock to really make a good go of it. But one nice thing is there are other models that could allow smaller producers to come together and pool their resources to do the infrastructure or to do the processing. The infrastructure is the one key piece on the land, but there's other sort of infrastructure items along the value chain that are crucial too for farmers to make more money, and that's slaughter
Mhm.
facilities, access to processing, value adding infrastructure. Um, one great thing we have here in Southern California as a resource is we're located, next to 5 million, 8 million people here in Southern California, depending upon which circle you want to draw. So the ability to go and sell direct to the consumer is very good. Whereas some ranchers, let's say, we have an investor that has a remote ranch up in northern Montana, and it's a town of like 17 people, and they're 8 hours away from a processing facility that they could take their beef to. And then again, I think Montana has like 500,000 people total in the state. So every model's got to be different, but again, their cost of land is a lot less. So and maybe their cost of labor is a little bit less too because it's cheaper to live in that area. So their cost of production can be lower. And maybe they could sell into markets like California. So there's a lot of gray in that question for sure,
Mhm.
but you got to kind of look at your strengths, your resources. Where's your capital coming from? You have land. One thing you could do is leverage the land. It's nice to have land that's not leveraged and debt free, but it doesn't take too much leverage to get into this game. So there's a lot of different strategies I think that you can develop, but you got to do the hard work of putting pencil and pen to paper, and then getting an Excel spreadsheet going, and starting to model it out. And it's hard though. It's hard to know how much the fencing is going to cost. For me, again, my one of my negatives is I hadn't really done this at scale yet. So being able to come in and exactly know how much fence to install, or where to put it, or how much it was going to cost, that was one of the downfalls. So maybe that's a strength of another rancher, is they kind of know that already. They just got to figure out the capital piece. So
Right.
it's kind of a combination of all those different things, I'd
Yeah,
say.
interesting. You come at it from two different directions, not really knowing the ranching business all that well, but knowing what you have to do to make it regenerative versus knowing the ranching business very well, but not knowing the regenerative side very well. So those are two completely different equations there. You came from one where established ranches will be coming from another. And I guess that's where a lot of these consultants can help. And you mentioned a number of names already of people who are out there as consultants who can really help those ranchers kind of find the way. Now, what about government? Like you mentioned earlier about government, it'd be nice if they were paying people to help the environment by adding perennial grasses and being able to hold water better. Do you think the government has a vital role in this? And should we be, yelling from our rooftops at our representatives, at our senators, at the administration that this should be a focus of the environmental push?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. I think regenerative agriculture needs to be a national conversation for sure because, again, I think it's at the foundation of a lot of the issues we see, in society today, whether it's water or, the obesity epidemic or, the diabetes, issues, a lot of the things that you cover in your practice. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of a localist kind of guy, so I'd like to see maybe more things come from the state level. Uh, if we make a big broad push at the federal level, it's going to have to be in some very key levered areas. Like one thing, actually, I think they could do at the federal level is just end the corn and Gabe Brown talks about this, but the corn and soy subsidies. It's just that one change alone would probably make grass fed beef, much more competitive from a price standpoint than grain fed beef. And overnight, people would, be looking for more economical ways to do their business, whether they're a grain farmer or whether they're a rancher, because we know grains affect beef and the beef industry quite a bit as well.
Mhm.
So probably that would be my biggest change at the federal level. But then I'd rather see um, more change at the state level because every state has its own sort of set of ecological issues. California, for example, people are environmentally inclined here, but they need the truth in terms of really what's going to create change. And there's some really good groups that are working on that, like Kiss the Ground, and doing some good lobbying. And I've heard Gavin Newsom has heard about it, but again, I'm not seeing a ton of work, on the ground in terms of grazing forest regeneratively again or selectively harvesting the forest to reduce the wildfire. Like we know how to do these things, and it's very frustrating that we're not like putting all of our attention on it because it's these fires cost billions of dollars of damage every year, and it's just you think we put some attention to it and create jobs and all that. But yeah, there's so much we could do, and but I'd like to see it at the state level, federal level, ending the corn soy subsidies. And so yeah, policy does for sure have it's part of the whole, right? Like we're talking about holistic management. We can't operate, as our like we have food regulations, we have this, we have that. So we have to take that into account if we're going to truly be managing the whole.
Yeah, yeah. And you bring up fire, which is obviously such a big problem here in California and in so many drought-stricken areas. And it does seem like properly managed land reduces the fire risks. I mean, that really should be a top priority because these acres and
Yeah.
acres just keep
Those
burning.
ladder fires, a lot of people, I think, like there's a good one of my colleagues, Brittany Colbush, is doing some really good work in Ojai, and she's using sheep and goats in kind of forested areas and reducing those opportunities for ladder fire, where the cows or goats or sheep can kind of browse around the trees and raise the height of where the branches kind of come down and touch the ground, is key because usually the fires are started on the grass or the brush, and then they'll get up into the canopies. And once they're in the canopies, you get these massive, climax fires that just burn through the tops of the canopies. Well, when the natives were managing this land, they were part of that whole. They thought of nature as their house, and they liked. I heard a Kumeyaay elder say this one time. We like to have a clean
Mhm.
house, so they would come and purposely set fires or kind of move animals in a way that where they would put hunting pressure on different herds, and they kind of had an intact ecology at that point, and they had kind of more manicured landscape. So we just have to get back. It's a change in mindset that there's this whole movement of environmentalists that wanted to protect land and just leave it to nature. Well, that was all in good when I think developers were out to develop every inch of California, and we did save some open spaces. But we now know that we can come in and actually make those landscapes better. And we're living in the Anthropocene, and there's barely any part of this planet that we haven't touched and affected. So nature's especially in the dry West not going to heal itself. So we have to come in and actually do the hard work of the intervention to get the desired effect that we want. But we have to decide on what that is as a group, and that's as very hard work, which is why folks like yourself are so important to kind of get the word out there. You have a large reach, so it's important to kind of get all the folks that are spreading the news on page, because the more people that we get exposed to this, and the more that we can develop a holistic goal together of like, okay, like nobody wants to live in a desert.
Mhm.
We want flowing streams, we want healthy forests, we want places to recreate for our kids that are beautiful, that aren't so hot, maybe have some shade. The more we can kind of create that goal and vision together, the more we can kind of enact it, put the actions in place to go do it.
Yeah. Well, so what kind of advice can you give to somebody then if they wanted to, they're not a rancher, but they eat meat and there's no certification for regenerative agriculture. It's, you can't go to your local grocery store and get regenerative ag raised beef. So what kind of advice can you give to somebody how they can help further the movement, how they can support the movement?
Yeah, sure. So there is a couple new certifications that are coming out. There's a regenerative organic certification that's coming out. It's pioneered by a lot of different folks. Maple Hill Organic, I think Patagonia threw some money in. Dr. Bronner's, David Bronner, who I know has done a lot of work to kind of put that forth. So there is some certification development going. I'm a supporter of their work. I like to see results based stuff on the ground, not just practice based certifications. I want, there's very clear ways that we can know if the land is regenerating or not. And we need to incentivize that. So the simplest way, and we say this at the farmers market, is just come out for a tour and we'll be transparent with where we're at, what we're doing, where we're headed, the animals, the genetics, because you're right, it doesn't happen overnight. So, to the person who's, you know, you're just a regular meat eater who's trying to support and see more of this, just, one, think about, sometimes folks can get a little, price shock when they come to the farmers market. Think about the nutrient density per dollar, right? We have to start getting to that mindset, right? Pay the farmer, pay the doctor later, right? So if you're paying for nutrient density of food, we're finding through some of this nutrient density science that Dan Kittredge and those folks are working on at the Bionutrient Food Association. They're coming out with this meter and trying to put the power of nutrient density into the hands of your average consumer. So I envision a day, hopefully here in the not too short term future, or long term future, that the farmers, people are having these devices and they go up to a stand and they test the produce, or they could take a sample of our meat and right away it kind of gives them, okay, here's the definition of nutrient density for this product. Here's the nutrient profile. And we now know that through this research, there's a correlation between soil health and nutrient density. So think about that. Think about where your dollars are going, but how they're being spent from a nutrient density perspective. Because the more nutrients you eat, the more full you are. I'm sure you probably cover this, a lot. So some of those things I would just tell people is start to get up on some of those conversations. Think about those things, and yeah, just try to meet your local rancher. Follow some of these certifications. There's a lot just coming out in the way of regenerative. So I think if you're paying attention to it, you're attuned to it, you're following on Google or Twitter or whatever, there's going to be stuff that comes up. So just buy in, start paying attention to the movement, and
Yeah.
I think it'll help.
Yeah. So if people do want to find out more about you or get in touch with you, how can they find you?
Yep, perennialpasturesranch.com is our website. We're working on that to get some products uploaded on that so you guys can order from us online soon here in Southern California. We're going to offer local delivery. Right now, if you're in Southern California, we're at 6 farmers markets: San Marcos, Lucadia, Carlsbad, Oceanside, Little Italy, and we're launching Rancho Santa Fe soon here shortly. Want to go into Vista. So we'd like to be in 10 to 30 markets here over the next year in Southern California. And then our Instagram, so Perennial Pastures with a dot in the middle is our Instagram. That's where we're most active on social media. We're not on Twitter or Facebook, so just pretty pictures of cows and stuff, explaining our fun soil stuff and all that we do. So that's probably the easiest way.
All
But
right, very good. Well, I really consider myself fortunate that my good friend met you at the Lucadia's Farmers Market and connected with you, and we were able to meet you and go for a tour and learn about all the amazing things you're doing. So thanks for taking the time to join me today and give us a little insight on sort of what it takes to be a regenerative agriculture rancher and the thought process that goes into it, because I know it's not easy, but gosh, it is so important for the future of our planet and for the future of our food environment as well. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Next, we're going to hear from Adam McCurdy. Now, I guess I'm going to say buckle up for this one because Adam is enthusiastic and passionate about what he does. He loves telling stories, and he's going to go through a roller coaster of a whole bunch of different topics and giving his position on things. But first, let me tell you who Adam is. So he's the director of farm productions at Coastal Root Farms, which you'll find at coastalrootsfarm.org. COASTALROOTS farm.org. And he's been in ag for 20 years, cultivating between 2 acres and 120 acres, currently managing 70 acres, and doing it in a way with dynamic, organic production, and really focusing on the land and focusing on systems that improve the land, not worried about getting the maximum amount of produce per acre, but worrying about doing the maximum amount of good, growing the right produce in the right way. And really, their whole mission at Coastal Roots is nourishing the community, fighting food insecurity, and improving the earth. And I think that's so great. I mean, they've got a pay what you can farm stand, which is exactly what it says. You pay whatever you think you can pay for the vegetables, for the eggs, for the wonderful food they have there. Their mission is above and beyond anything. And luckily, they're local to me, so I've had the ability to go there, buy their food, tour their farm, and it is amazing. So we're going to get a different perspective of things, focusing more on sort of the vegetable production and differentiating that from the huge, monoculture, big tilled farms that are probably doing more harm than good. So buckle up for this roller coaster here with some good stories and some good perspective with Adam McCurdy. All right, so Adam, we've just heard from two ranchers, and I love the quote from Daniel that ranchers are the original environmentalists. And I know with Kevin, you've actually worked quite a bit with him. And so now I want to transition from the ranching side of things to the agriculture side of things, growing plants, but still with the focus on taking care of the environment, because it seems like such of a focus has been on cattle production, that cattle production is evil, or cattle production can be our savior with regenerative agriculture. And what I think maybe isn't discussed as much is growing vegetables, growing plants, growing other types of food, which also falls into the sort of the same category of, is it good for the environment? So give us sort of your overarching view of what does it mean to grow food in a way that is good for the environment, takes care of people, and takes care of the
Yeah,
earth.
thanks, Brett. Appreciate that. That one is definitely going to take us over the half hour that we have to share together here today. So, yeah, that's a big idea to chew on. And I think I'm going to just start off with mentioning, originally started farming. Well, first got into it in Maine, um, where that was kind of the beginning of my hunger relief and food recovery approach. And I worked with an amazing old fella who had been with the Maine Organic Farmers MOFGA, Maine Organic Farming Growers Association, or something like that, for eons. I think he actually helped found it. And I was working in the recycling center as a young AmeriCorps volunteer who moved across the country. And I would go to different counties with him, and we were gleaning. And he started to show me the difference of a field that was managed conventionally and a field that was managed organically. And I said, well, what's conventional
Mhm.
and what's organic? And why is convention, meaning the regular, what's called this chemical agriculture? And it just started this whole kind of
Right.
launch, which is how I got into it. I mean, I was doing environmental education and trail building. Granted, we're talking about a 19-year-old Adam at this point. And I was really, I'd sit at the edge of potato fields eating a sandwich after doing some timber stand management on potato bread, and I'd say, "What's our food system really all about? Do these potatoes in this bread,
Right.
which I just got because it was like the moistest, yummiest, chewiest white bread you could have." Uh, no nutrient value at all. I thought because it was potatoes, maybe a little bit more than Wonder Bread, but I don't know. Jury's out on that one. Um, and so just the food system connection. And I thought, where is our food coming from? And why is the conventional soil all cracked and looks devoid of life? And why is the organic soil look like a weedy mess? uh, black gold with weeds all over the place. I digress,
Yeah.
but I just kind of wanted to open it up there to get back to your question of managing organic production um, in a regenerative method. I was going to say regenerative sustainable, but
Right.
so over 20 years ago when I got into this, certified organic was just becoming a federal standard. Um, Farmers markets were kind of on the decline. I watched it go from decline, nobody knew what kale was, and there was only a couple to sell to the market getting flooded and too many farmers markets. It wasn't worth the farmers' time to come and sell there anymore, because where they could come and do a $2,000 day and activate your crew, harvest, transport, display, market, sell, adrenal, you'd take your $3,000 worth of goods and you'd leave selling $500 worth, because there was now a Tuesday
Yeah.
market and a Friday market. And people no longer didn't know what kale was. They said, "Oh, it's nice to see you have the winter-boar kale. Do you have lacinato kale? Do you have any of the red Russian kale?" And that just brought a tear to my eye. I was so happy I was able to watch this movement. But it was certified organic. It was sustainable. Um, Regenerative wasn't even being tossed around 20 years ago. It sure is now, which I'm happy to see, because when I say sustainable, the thought of what are we sustaining? So I'll go into some of the information that's out
Right.
there, and what are we sustaining if we're sustainably growing? Well, we're sustaining a system that says that we have 60 harvests left, depending on the source that you look at, right? I mean, 60, 100, 120, 160, 30, 10. We're in COVID, right? We've got 10. No,
Some
I
say
don't know.
10.
No, but it does go to that, like, how many years does it take to build an inch of topsoil, right? And there's a million and one sources out there, which is
Right.
so great. I'm so glad that we're having these conversations. And to your point, the ranching is so entirely different than like annual row crop vegetables. So any orcharding that we're doing, anything
Right.
that we're doing in our 8-acre food forest is much more tied into like a perennial carbon sequestration situation. Whereas when you get into annual vegetables, I remember 20 years ago listening to NPR while I was and hearing the NPR news release. This is 20 years ago. Tilling your soil releases carbon into the atmosphere. Are organic farmers the cause of our demise in on our planet? And so I was like, oh, what am I doing? And so here we're having continued conversations. So
Yeah. So that's really interesting that so no long, organic had this halo around it, that it was like the one way to go. But then it shows that organic isn't everything, because organic can still release carbon into the atmosphere, and that's where this regenerative comes from, trying to help sequester carbon. But you used a couple terms that I want to just clarify. So annuals, perennials, and ag forest. Give us a quick definition of those, so the listener can understand
okay,
kind of
so
what
an
you're talking
annual
about.
row crop vegetable or an annual vegetable, you grow it in your garden. You sow that seed that year. That spring, you get it that spring or that summer. A radish take you 30 days. It's an annual in the Brassicaceae family. So annual vegetables, you sow them that season, you get them that season. Okay, a bunch of varying timelines. Perennial, going to perennially keep happening. So on and on and on. In between those two is biennial, which would be like a carrot, parsley. Although a lot of times parsley will sprout out in the first year. Everything can sprout out in the first year. It's a process called vernalization, which triggers the innate knowledge of the plant to say, "Hey, it's time for me to go to seed." So it might be stress, might be anything. And then agroforestry or food forest are terms that are used, pretty loosely. They're very prevalent in permaculture settings, in homesteading settings. It's really about utilizing the land and a natural structure to work with the land and produce in that regard. Now, oftentimes it's missing, especially like, and I mean, some of the best growers are homesteaders, and I would like to get my seeds and my rootstock from homesteaders across the boards. But homesteaders and folks that are going to straight permaculture for the environment around them are not always looking at that. Well, what's my return on investment going to be? How much does the seed cost? How much does my fertility cost? Once I make
Right.
this move and I'm committed to hand weeding, what does that mean for my labor staffing? All of that is different if you're talking about, like we were talking about, organic farmers had the halo, wait, maybe they're tilling. Organic can take a lot more tillage, because you're controlling your weed pests with tillage. You're terminating a crop with disking or tilling. You're not using these chemicals that can be used for burn down and kill down. So on that note, and I know I just tangented, but on that note, folks say, "Oh, tilling is bad. Oh, got to go no-till." Some of the largest systems of no-till that we have in this nation are more chemically intensive than any other production. So you don't get to just,
Hmm.
sorry, it's not that easy.
Yeah. So it's really interesting though, because part of what I think we need to try and do is simplify things for the end
Yeah,
user, for the consumer, so that they can sort of vote with their pocketbooks, right? That's what we say about
yeah,
buying better meat, buying from ranches like Kevin's that really focuses on the earth, on the ground, on the soil, on being regenerative. So how can someone know if what they're buying is from a place that is taking care of the land? It's easy for Coastal Roots because you've got your own farm stand, and you give farm tours, and which I've been on. If anybody's near the Encinitas area, you have to check it out because it's amazing, all the variety and the diversification and the chickens, and like the produce is so amazing. But how can someone know that? What's a take home they can do to say, I want to support places like this, rather than supporting the large corporations that are really destroying our land in the name of producing as much food as cheaply as
yeah.
possible?
Great. That's the thick old nut that we have to crack here. Um, and that is really a tough answer. A, get to know your farmer. Um, that's the best bit. Then maybe even you get to spend some time on the land, and
Yeah.
that's as nourishing as anything else. But not everybody is privy to that. So farmers markets offer that opportunity. Buy local and from your local farmer. You're supporting your regional food system at that point. Even if they're not certified organic. Now, certified organic, one of the reasons there was the huge pushback, it takes a lot. Like a lot of my day is focusing on regulations, making sure that we're adhering to the County of San Diego Department of Agriculture, making sure that we're adhering to San Diego Irrigated Lands Group, making sure that we're adhering to CDFA, California Department of Food and Agriculture, making sure that we're adhering to CCOF, who is our organic certifying body. So it brought about a good streamline. I'm glad it's there, but it's super cumbersome. And if you have a small farm, you're not going to go through that process. I'm sorry. It's just you're not going to choose to go into that bureaucracy. I stuck with it when it was first going through all of that because I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to help the statistics. I wanted to put that energy in and really be an organic grower that did have a gleaning program and did sell at farmers markets and did have 1,000-member CSA and did work with local food banks. And I wanted to keep that there. But it was really, I was like, I'm not making it, just like at Coastal Roots, we're not making any more off of our direct sale product because it's organic. We're just not.
Okay. And the same for sustainable regenerative. It doesn't bring you any more money, but it costs you more labor and effort. So do you think things need to be put in place to reward systems like yours and maybe take away from other systems that are doing harm to the environment, as opposed to you that's
Oh,
benefiting the
yeah, that'd
environment?
be fantastic. I think, yeah, yeah.
Just tell you how to do it,
Right. I
right? How
think
do
we're
we
on the
make that
move there.
happen?
Let me get back. I want to talk about that, but I want to just finish off how the end user can make their choice. So that's
Yes,
know your
please,
farmer, go
please.
to your farmer's market, buy from the little pop up on the corner, even if it's not a farmer's market, because it's somebody that's growing on land real close to you. Now, if you have chronic issues of anything, and somebody's growing in the backyard and you don't know, like you're super sensitive to heavy metals, you're super sensitive to this or that, be mindful, check it out, see, but there, your grower, you can talk to them about it. And you can say, did you test for heavy metals before you started growing and selling? No? Okay, cool. I'm going to bow out on this. Or, hey, do you mind if I sample it? And I'll give you some reports. And that's awesome. That's community working together. The other thing is, because organic has become such a trusty label, go for it. But it doesn't mean you're doing the right thing. Just like pasture raised
Hmm.
or free range on your chicken eggs, it doesn't mean you're doing the right thing. The regulations for free range means that the chicken is seeing the light of day. It doesn't mean you're not supporting a CAFO. So, but do that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
And here's what I always say: Trader Joe's organic, different than Costco organic, different than Vaughn's organic. it's all under the same umbrella, but you might have, Trader Joe's, they do a really cool process in how they do it. And I almost started selling to them when I had small pumpkins, but it's just like it's a contract. They're working with different growers than anybody else. Those growers might have a relationship with Trader Joe's and with Vaughn's, but it's a different setup altogether. But where I'm going is, if all you can get is Dole organic salad mix, it's Dole. Dole is still doing a lot of the harm that Dole was doing before. Dole is also doing a lot of research dollars into organic and regenerative, maybe selfishly because they want a steady supply, just like General Mills. General Mills actually has partnered with, loosely partnered with Farmer Brown on supporting Farmer Brown's for-profit consulting aspect about how grain growers can convert to regenerative, because they want it. That's selfish. They want a steady supply. Well, I hope it's not fully selfish. I hope that they have a leader in a CEO type position that's like, you know what? We got to stop looking at this land like it's something that we get to exploit and it's put here for us. And we need to go back and just start to take care of this land. And we are so large that we can make a huge impact. That's what I hope. But I'm going to say it's selfish. I'm going to say it's dollar bottom line selfish. But I don't know the CEO for Dole, and I'm that's not scientifically proven. So what I'd say is they're still doing all that. However, they could go and buy up an entire swath of the last arable piece of land. That cost will not be an issue for them. So if they decide to do that, and they're growing 4,000 acres of organic mixed lettuce, that's 4,000 acres of lettuce that's being grown, that's in our food system, that is a part of a watershed that is not using synthetic chemicals. It's not using genetically engineered seed, and it's not using synthetic chemicals. So go for it. It's not going to taste like the salad mix you come and get at our farm stand, I can tell you that. And we don't have those fancy bags that make it so it lasts longer. You're going to get it, maximum 3 days old from us, and maybe 2 hours old, maybe 3 minutes old. So that's where that can come in. So I digress. I could go on and on about that one, but vote with your dollar, put your money where your love is, get to know your farmer, connect with your land, and then start supporting your local grocery store that has organic, even if it's twice as much. And, that head of lettuce is probably going to be old because it was a $5 head of lettuce. It sat there for a week before someone came to buy it, because they only bought it because they were committed to the mission, or they had chronic illness and knew that if there were trace bits of pesticides on there, or again, they're privileged and don't have to worry about the $5 for the head of lettuce. So all of that.
Right. Good point. All right. I love your enthusiasm, and your answers just show like how enthusiastic you are about this, which is great. So I want to transition for 1 second though to your chickens. I love your chickens. I love when my kids got to come out and meet a lot of your chickens when you first got them, and we brought food that you use to feed the chickens. And you definitely you mentioned that free range doesn't mean anything, but the way you have your chickens live and their eggs is clearly different. So tell us what people should be looking for to make sure they're getting chickens that are raised the way chickens are supposed to be raised, eating what chickens are supposed to be eating, and producing the best eggs possible.
So again, you can only do the best you can at the supermarket, and the labeling now is super awesome and confusing. Like Vital Farms does an awesome job. I think they have the coolest packaging ever too. It's so pretty. It's beautiful art. It's all recyclable, compostable. Their eggs are fantastic, and they're supporting a lot of different smaller operations. They're kind of like an Organic Valley kind of thing. So that's awesome. You get a cooperative kind of thing like that. Again, get to know where your chickens are coming from. I mean, I would buy, now you got to question it, because if there's eggs for sale at the corner of your street and they're in a little cooler and they come about, they might just be a backyard flock, and the people may or may not be spending the extra money to feed them organic feed. They may or may not go through the extra effort of giving them their chicken scraps. They may or may not grow cover crop in their garden and feed it to them. So check it out, but that would be the best thing. If you can get a good source like that, that's as fresh as it can be. And so our chickens are running through our silvopasture, which is a super cool concept used in agroforestry, used in these food forests, used throughout. And it's where you move livestock through your alleyways between your orchard, or between your nut crop, or between your row crops. And so what we actually do is we have We have the best eggs on the planet. No, just kidding. But I just took a moment to promote. But actually, we sell out all the time, and we're not ramping up to the point where we can really meet the demand, because we're losing our shirts on our chickens. And in order to scale up to the point where we wouldn't be losing our shirts, and it's a wise enterprise economic decision, I'm sure we'd blow through every like neighborhood regulation that you possibly could. Because right now we have 2 coops, about 75 birds in each coop, all laying hens except for one rooster to help protect and to kind of help keep the pecking order in place. That's a real thing. I'm not chauvinistic. I'm absolutely open-minded to all. And that's just a part of it. And we rotate our chickens. We have a couple of different methods, but we basically will rotate them through where we've had a crop, whether they're going in to eat the crop residue or they're going in to eat a nice cover crop. They eat all the bugs, they leave their deposit, they stay in that footprint for a week or two, and then they move to the next footprint. Now, that's not no-till. Those chickens just tilled that soil. If you're talking about a regenerative pasture no-till, you're moving the chickens, like Joel Salatin and whatnot, on the grass. You're moving the chickens maybe a couple times a day. You're moving your sheep maybe once a day, once every couple days. Your cows, so you're getting them to basically mow your grass, cruise along, leave their deposit, eat the bugs, let the flies hatch in their poo, and you get this whole microcosm. It's amazing. Miracles happen right before your eyes. Now, this is a different situation. Miracles do happen before our eyes, but we're moving them. They're in mobile coops. They run along, and and then we throw them our food scraps too. I think this is where you're going, and you probably had some other conversations, but that transition period, if we're talking about converting, thousands and thousands of acres, if we're talking about converting these large swaths of farmland throughout our nation and throughout the world, it's that fear of the systems that are barely working enough to keep the shirt on the farmer's back and keep their family in their home and
Right.
keep them on their land, and their children don't want to work the land because they watch mom and dad just like blood, sweat, and tears and barely scraping it in. And no, they can't go to Disneyland because they already had to you pay for tennis, right? I mean, it's just like, it's real. And that fear, that's what's going to make that conversion, is if there's systems in place. You talked about those incentives. If there's those systems in place that will help those farmers convert, if they decide to be that rebel in their Midwest community, and they're going to sit there and have coffee with all their local farmers, and they're going to say, hey, I'm converting, I'm doing that regen thing. They probably need some counseling support because they're about to get shunt in their own community. They are taking a leap of faith, because it's going to take them at least 3 to 5 years to make that shift from all of their equipment, the timing, the seed
Right.
expense. Like, how do you start to bite it off? So I think that's where a lot of that consulting that I know Farmer Brown is getting into, and Carbon Institute, and there's a lot of different things that are happening out there. I mean, schools are even doing it, but that's what it's going to take to make that huge conversion. And I don't even remember where we started with that one, but take me back or take me forward. Let's
I
keep
don't
going.
either. That's awesome. But I think that's where I wanted to go is, I think the main points are for one, people to understand your enthusiasm, your passion for this, and how it's about growing healthy, nutrient-dense foods, but it's also doing it in a way that protects the environment and paving the way for others to do it. So that Midwestern farmer who is monocropping can learn to transition somehow to doing what you're doing. And yes, it's a leap of faith, and yes, it's a challenge, but in the long run, it's what promises a better outcome for the farmer and for the land. And you kind of have to believe it. You have to hear from people like you who are doing it and living it to know that it can be the case. So I think that's what's so important about this, about your mission and about what you're doing. And so many details. I mean, we could get into so many details about crop rotation, and about cover crops and the soil fertility and topsoil. And I mean, there's so much that comes out of this, and water retention, so many benefits that come out of the way you're running your farm. But I just leave it for a conclusion of what are the main take homes that people can do to know how they can contribute, how they can help, and how they can make it so that that's the direction we're headed.
Nice. That sounds great. Before we set out another regulation, why don't we start to just support the notion? Let's refine it and support the notion and get these other things in place where there's investment going in. Hey, you want to convert your Imperial Valley land? You want to convert your land in Nebraska? We got your back for 5 years. And then there's a transition period out. And hey, guess what? You're not alone.
Yeah.
There's other farmers, and we've got all this equipment. And we know that you're going to need the no-till crimper at the same time. So we bought 4 of them. So I digress again,
like
but
it.
what can
I
folks
like
do? Get to know where your food is coming from. Get to a really good soluble, and Woody Harrelson really helped bring it about, but Kiss the Ground. Awesome. Great
Yeah.
book, great movie. We showed it at the farm. And another individual who has a really wonderful podcast tied in similarly to the holistic health that you're bringing about, is I listen to 2 different doctors' podcasts, and now I'm going to start listening to yours too. One is Dr. Zach Bush, and the other is Dr. Mark Hyman. And I don't know your relationship with them, so if I just mentioned old buddies, hey, how cool. If I just offended anybody, hey, I'm sorry. But so Kiss the Ground,
Good.
I'm sorry, Farmer's Footprint has done a really cool job, and they're actually building soil advocates. So they've got a regenerative soil workshop training, which I'm actually thinking of doing. I think that it would be super fun, and to see what's going on, next door with this, because we do it on a small scale. If we've got an employee, a farmer, or an educator on the farm, and we're going to do a farm tour, spend an hour and talk about the different things, and then each tour, they get to build on it a little bit more. But to go through an intensive like that, you learn about your soil, you learn about your food system, and we're all impacting the food system in different ways.
Yeah.
So I would say that those would be kind of some of the key
Very cool.
takeaways. I could keep going, but I won't.
Well, there you have it. 3 different perspectives, 2 ranchers and a farmer, but really coming to the same sort of conclusion that the land is there to help us grow food to nourish humans, to grow real food to nourish humans. And if we don't care for that enough, if we don't really prioritize taking care of the land, then we're going to be in trouble. But by prioritizing taking care of the land, we can get ourselves out of trouble. So by using cattle in the appropriate way to manage the land, not only are we growing the highest source of protein we can, but we are taking carbon out of the atmosphere and sequestering it in the soil. By focusing on crop rotation and agroforests and perennials and cover crops, we're helping the land sequester water better, use water better, so it's not as water intensive, and we're producing nutrient-dense foods for people by using chickens to come in and help with the land and produce some of the healthiest eggs you can. I mean, it's all part of the system. And I love the quote, when we stop thinking about the land as a resource and start thinking about it as something that gives us life and gives us nourishment. That's what, I mean, it almost sounds idealistic, right? To say that sounds idealistic, because how are we going to get these companies that are worried about maximum production per acre of land? How are we going to get them to change their perspective? And it's not going to happen overnight. But like we heard from Adam McCurdy, that there is this change happening, and there are some potential ways to do it by supporting the local farmers, by supporting farmers who are transitioning to this way of growing their crops. And they have to sort of take a leap of faith, like he said, to do it. But if there is that support in place, if there is some sort of a safety net to help people make that transition, we're doing the environment a huge benefit, and we're growing more nutrient-dense foods that people need. So again, it was a bit of a whirlwind between all 3 of them, but hopefully this gives you a good perspective on where we stand, where we're going, and what you can do to make better choices for the food you eat. And of course, it's easy to say and easy to do if you have the resources to do it. It's much more difficult if you don't have the resources to do it, but it doesn't mean you can't still think about it and try and prioritize it as best you can. And we can all hope for a day where it is as easy to buy regeneratively grown cucumbers and broccoli and kale as it is to buy wheat that's been, monocultured and tilled and processed in these huge farms. Hopefully one day it'll be just as easy. So thanks for joining us on the Diet Doctor podcast, and we'll see you next time.